I would like to talk to you about how entrepreneurship is the solution to the biggest problem our civilization faces today. This is Nico Benson. He's like any other 12-year-old boy in Denmark. When I met him, he was very sweet, a bit shy and down to earth. Very early in his life, Nico had an interest in farming, but his parents didn't know anything about agriculture. So Nico found a local farmer where he could work after school and weekends. And there he got the idea to start his own farm. Nico's neighbor had an empty field, and Nico asked if he could use it. And he got a yes. Today he cultivates carrots, leeks, onions, potatoes, salad, and he sells his produce in his own farm shop and on his Facebook page. Nico is saving up for a bigger tractor, and he takes pride in not using any chemicals on his fields. He's all about the local community, and his project brings people together. Now, I tell you about Nico because to me, he's a brilliant example about what entrepreneurship is all about. Finding out what you really like, seeing a problem or an opportunity, and then starting something meaningful around it. It doesn't need to start big, but a pursuit that starts this early might in fact end up growing to something quite amazing. I hope that after this talk, you will be excited to support entrepreneurs, to be kind to those who try, and maybe even become an entrepreneur yourself. For those of you who already are entrepreneurs, this is an opportunity to feel really, really good about yourself for the next 12 to 15 minutes. So what is entrepreneurship? In my world, it's the act of starting something from nothing. It can be a business, it can be a non-profit, a movement, even a country. And as I see it, entrepreneurship is the driving force behind everything that moves the world forward. And let's make use of our history lessons for a moment. If you were alive 100 years ago, what would be your biggest problems? These two babies are both December children. One of them is my daughter, Münde, who was born in 2006. The other one is Katrin, born 100 years earlier in 1906. Münde and her generation, according to new research, have a life expectancy of close to 100 years, whereas Katrin could only expect to live 50 years. That's twice as much life, which is, I believe, is quite remarkable. Of course, there are many different explanations for how this came about, and one of them is definitely antibiotics. Before Sir Alexander Fleming invented penicillin, you could quite literally die from a splinter. In fact, a friend of mine's grandfather did. Of course, our objective is not only to have quantity, but also quality of life. And 100 years ago, you would probably be quite worried just about getting access to food. New techniques in farming changed that, a movement that our friend Nico is a modern-day example of. You also needed the ability to be able to store food. And this is where the refrigerator came in and saved the day. Invented in 1918, the domestic refrigerator finally went mainstream in the 30s. You might think that this is all good, but a big part of the world population are still lacking the basics, like access to food and water. And you're totally right. Entrepreneurship does indeed work best in political, stable circumstances. However, there are some wonderful examples out there to give us hope. This is one that I'm particularly proud of. A group of Danish entrepreneurs in 2005 invented the life straw, making it possible to literally drink clean water from a mud pit, and it's been sold and distributed to millions of low-income customers. You might object that this only shows that inventions and inventors are important, but what is really the role of entrepreneurs in all this progress? Let's have a look at that. Who invented the internet? It wasn't Al Gore. He is using it though, we'll have to give him that. And I did too yesterday. I Googled who invented the internet. 18 names came up, and I think this shows us two things. First, that the act of inventing something game-changing is most often a cumulative process where many individuals collaborate or compete to end up with something that is useful. Inventors and scientists are definitely required, but so is the whole ecosystem around them, providing the necessary funding, production facilities, customer interaction and communication, etc. Secondly, how many of these names did you know already? I will admit that I only knew 2 of them. So out of 18 names, and we're probably forgetting someone, I only knew 11% of the names of the inventors of the internet. Now, the rest of you are obviously not that ignorant, but just follow my argument for a moment. Here are 18 other names. These guys surely didn't invent the internet. They are the entrepreneurs who made it all possible for us to benefit from the invention. Chances are that you know a lot more than 2 of these names, am I right? And that's not only because that entrepreneurs get all the limelight and the inventors and the scientists just slave away in the lab with only lab rats to keep them company. It's more so because that without entrepreneurs like these and a lot more, the invention of the internet in itself wouldn't have had much value to you. I'm not out to put inventors or scientists down. I think they're downright awesome. I'm merely stating that without entrepreneurship, there will be no bridge between the lab and the world. You might wonder why I care so much about entrepreneurship personally. When I was in 7th grade, we were asked by our teacher what we wanted to be when we grew up. I answered entrepreneur. And my teacher said, but Martin, you got good grades. You can get a real job. And I felt so misunderstood that day. Well, today I am an entrepreneur, and it's not a job. It's a hobby, it's a passion, it's a calling. I'm so grateful for that, and I know that I owe that to my father. My father was an entrepreneur all his life, and he still is. When I was a kid, he would always be excited about his projects, and in the middle of starting up all different sorts of businesses. Everything from selling toys to running a video rental. So entrepreneurship feels like home to me. When I grew up, I wanted to become an entrepreneur, like my dad, but I noticed how values were not really a part of my father's view on business, whereas for my grandfather, values were everything. Now, my grandfather, he was a metal worker and later a union treasurer, and what he really cared about was fair work conditions for everyone. So I grew up inspired by my dad to start things, but I wanted to be collaborative and strive for impact like my granddad. And my teacher made me think the world should be different. Now, I wish I could say to you that this was all I needed, but the first 5 years that I had in entrepreneurship was utterly failures. It was actually quite painful. I tried over and over again, and I failed. So there was no support at the time, there was no ecosystem, and everything that was already established, it seemed to me that all the big companies, the universities, government, would treat a startup as a naughty child. Ignore them and they will hopefully stop. So after 5 years, I gave up. I went to business college, and after that I got a job at McKinsey as a management consultant. I thought the world was right and I was wrong. So it would be smarter to give up, work for the big guys, and not to be foolish enough to believe that you could create your own thing. Everyone applauded me. Suddenly I had prestige, because McKinsey has prestige. My dad was impressed. Everyone told me how lucky I was, but the reality was that I was miserable. I kept doing it until I couldn't do it anymore. Eventually, I couldn't sleep. I knew that I either had to succumb or to find a way to get back on track. And the only track that I knew was entrepreneurship. But I was terrified. I found an entrepreneur who was already successful that I could work with. And I sat just next to him and I learned a lot. This is definitely a method that I can strongly recommend. Slowly my confidence was restored, and after a while I got a new business idea. I pursued that business idea, and it succeeded. I felt momentum. I wanted to create something bigger. Together with 3 friends, we came up with the idea to make a company factory. A company factory. So to get business ideas, our own business ideas, recruit team members, get customers, like any other entrepreneur, but with more infrastructure and support. Since we launched in 2006, we have created 20 businesses based on that methodology. And then we expanded to help other entrepreneurs with their ventures. Today we're running accelerators, co-working spaces, doing hackathons, bridging entrepreneurs with investors and corporates in so far 30 countries. Our mission is to create the best possible platform for entrepreneurs to succeed. Now, entrepreneurship is not, in my view, a position, it's a choice. Everyone can be entrepreneurial, it's about the mindset. Whether you are an employee or an employer, it's mainly about your risk profile. Doing an effort to improve things is for everyone, and the same is the satisfaction that follows. So, how can entrepreneurship help us solve the big problems, and admittedly quite complex problems, that our civilization faces today? According to the World Economic Forum, these 10 are the most important ones. Fiscal crisis, unemployment, water crisis, poverty, climate change, extreme weather, governance failure, food crisis, financial collapse, political and social instability. Imagine 100 years from now. How will entrepreneurship have helped us solve these problems? Let's have a look at the one that's least intuitive that entrepreneurship can help us with, political and social instability. Now, a few years ago, I was traveling in Guatemala, one of the most dangerous, corrupt, and poor countries in Latin America. What I learned there was how the best NGOs actually are not focusing anymore on handing out food and medicine, but much more on training the local population in entrepreneurship. Microloans are used to get new businesses, new local businesses started, and networks are formed because a community of proud business owners is a lot harder to suppress than a group of anonymous day workers. Entrepreneurship can also help us solve smaller problems, like our everyday annoyances. I don't know if you heard of the selfie stick. I saw it in London last week, and I was quite impressed by the creativity behind it. We all know the situation. Who will volunteer to not be in the photo? Or the awkwardness of having to ask a stranger to take our romantic picture in front of the Notre Dame. Is it okay to kiss in front of him? Can you ask him to take another shot? Last year, this photo went around the world, and it was particularly amusing to us Danes because our Prime Minister, Helle Thorning, seizes the opportunity to snap a selfie together with President Obama and some invasive guy here on the left. I don't know what he was thinking. Anyway, the First Lady is upset. It's very clear. Now, with a selfie stick, Michelle Obama could have been in the photo. And Mr. Invasive Guy too, without the inappropriate leaning. So I hope that by now you'll agree with me that entrepreneurship is pretty awesome. Whether it was farming, antibiotics, the internet, or the selfie stick that got to you. However, the challenge is that as a society, we don't really support entrepreneurship. Many entrepreneurs, young or old, get a somewhat similar experience as the one I did. Less than 0.2% of the world population lives in Silicon Valley, London, or Tel Aviv. And we need innovation, entrepreneurship, and support all around the world, not just in a few innovation hotspots. One of the things that concerns me the most is that we still bring up our children to take the safe route and get a job. By the age of 7, most children can actually already answer the question of what they want to be when they grow up. I've done some research, and I can tell you that very few of them will answer entrepreneur or I want to start my own business. But I also promise you that's only until they learn a bit about how cool it actually is to start their own thing. And a shift has started to happen. Kids are nowadays trained in coding. They go to startup summer schools. And in Denmark, there has been a new school reform demanding that children are taught entrepreneurship, innovation, and creativity already from the 2nd grade. I recently had the opportunity to work with this group of kids. We did a workshop. Before the workshop, only one of them knew what entrepreneur even meant, and no one had that dream for their future. Now, when asked a week after the workshop, more than half the children wanted to one day start their own company. I understand if you object that business people are not always nice people, and that some companies, big or small, seem to be acting quite selfish and all about accumulating wealth for a small group of owners. However, the way to change that is to engage with the next generation of entrepreneurs as they create the next generation of businesses. To show them support and interest from an early age, train them in competences and values, celebrate the behavior we want to see, and I promise you, a generation from now, the business landscape will be completely transformed. In 1930, the average lifespan for the 500 biggest companies of the world were 90 years. In 2013, that was down to 18 years, and it's projected to be 10 years by 2020. So the big companies of today that are not behaving well will disappear. The question is, what will come instead of them? What will replace them? The most inspiring vision I have ever heard is a world that works for everyone. The question is how to get there. At a profound level, I believe that entrepreneurship is the answer. The Dalai Lama recently said, if every 8-year-old in the world is taught meditation, we will eliminate violence from the world within 1 generation. We can add, and if every child is taught entrepreneurship, then that world without violence will be an abundant and well-functioning one. All of us might even get our own selfie stick. It's not easy to start something from nothing. Please be kind to those who try.